He was a formidable journalist, a conscientious storyteller, a fearless advocate for justice, a voice for the voiceless. Derek Watts stood for the marginalized, the victimized, the ignored. Always inquisitive, Derek also loved an adventure. His 35 years on Carte Blanche took him to most corners of the globe, opportunities seized with his famous enthusiasm. Yes, Derek was a life lived to its fullest. Good evening, and kenanka kgotso to the special edition of Carte Blanche. Tonight, we pay tribute to Derek, our colleague, our mentor, our friend.
Ordinarily, we would remember Derek with a minute's silence, but we know he would never want us to keep quiet. Instead, we are going to loudly celebrate a true South African icon.
In 1988, Derek took a leap of faith, joining a yet unnamed actuality show as a co-host with Ruda Landman. Die program was die heel eerste van sy soort vir Mnet en vir Suid-Afrika. Min het Derek geweet hoe ingrypend Carte Blanche sy lewe sou verander en hoe hy, op sy beurt, die lewens van soveel mense reg oor die land sou beïnvloed.
The show changed the broadcasting landscape in the country, propelling Derek into the public spotlight as he told the stories of a fraught transition to democracy. In the 35 years that followed, he worked his way into the hearts of our loyal viewers in a way only he could.
Derek believed in treating people with dignity and respect. He rarely got angry in interviews and yet still caught to the heart of stories that needed to be told. He had the same approach off camera too. Quick with a joke, he was never too busy or too distracted for a chat. And few could let their hair down as enthusiastically as he did. His dance floor headstands are testament to that.
On Tuesday, the 22nd of August, Derek lost his battle with cancer. And in the past few days, our team has been deeply moved by the thousands of messages, tributes, and memories that so many of you have shared with us. They spoke of a gentle giant, kind, compassionate, and someone who always made time for the people he met.
We are wounded by his loss, but we stand together to pay tribute to one of the most extraordinary broadcasters in our country, a man whose love for his work and his family knew no bounds. Our executive producer, John Webb, shares a few words.
Well, this is something for which I feel utterly unprepared. How could I be? How could anybody be? In the past few days, I have struggled to find the words that properly do justice to the legacy of Derek Watts, to a life that was so extraordinary, a man who was so extraordinary. I've spoken to a lot of people and I've done several interviews in which I've tried to paint a picture of what the man was like, who he was, what he valued, and the impression that he left on me, and I know on other people too. But somehow I have struggled. I don't think I have properly done justice to the legacy of Derek Watts, nor to the influence that he has had on my life, and I know the lives of the rest of the Carte Blanche team. I've tried, but I don't know that I possess the vocabulary to fully paint the picture, particularly to people who didn't know him personally, who had never met him. And perhaps the reason for that is that more than anything else, being with Derek, talking to Derek, being in his company, was about how he made you feel. How somehow you felt bigger than perhaps you felt you were. That you were somehow better than perhaps at times you felt you were. Derek had that ability to make you believe that you were the best of yourself because he took a genuine interest in what you had to say. And again, I don't know that I'm fully capturing who he was or what he represented, but I hope that you're getting an insight, that you're getting some sort of picture into this remarkable, remarkable man. To be honest, you've been far better at it than I have. In the thousands of messages shared by people from all walks of life, from every conceivable corner of the country, you've demonstrated how Derek's impact straddled the boundaries that so often define this country of ours and that so often divide us. And what better testament could there be to Derek Watts? So, from all of us at Carte Blanche, the entire Carte Blanche family, as we call ourselves, from our colleagues at MultiChoice and Mnet, please, from the bottom of our hearts, accept our thanks to you for the tributes, the memories, the reflections of an extraordinary man and an extraordinary life. And join us after the break as we try as best we can to pay tribute to our patriarch, our mentor, our colleague and our friend, Derek Watts.
I remember it was one of my first times in studio. And at the end of my first show, he turned to me and he gave me a fist bump and he looked me in the eye. And it was all right with the world.
His smile and that hand, you know, whenever you meet Derek, he'll greet you and he'll always put his hand on your shoulder. And I think no matter how bad your day was, that comforting big hand on your shoulder just makes you feel like everything's going to be okay.
He used to make me laugh so much. Gave me really good advice. I will miss hearing his footsteps in the corridor. He's what, 2 meters tall, right? I will miss hearing his footsteps because I know what comes after those footsteps is just good energy.
He's touched my life in an incredible way. He gave his all and his heart to everyone he met.
Okay, Derek, take 22, please. Let's go.
Serious? No, you're not serious.
Come, we won't wait.
Not serious.
You're on the air now.
These bastards just keep me going the whole bloody time, man.
You're on there, let's go.
Don't believe it. You know, judging by the bleary eyes I saw in the conference yesterday, you guys have had mornings like this every morning so far.
The people's presenter, Derek Watts, entered our living rooms and our lives over 40 years ago.
I feel like kissing you. It's my lucky night, guys.
For most of that time, he was on Carte Blanche's screen as anchor and journalist, something in his own words he felt extremely proud of. And we, as his Carte Blanche family, past and present, are grateful that Derek touched each and every one of us in his own special way. This is our tribute.
It's 7 p.m. I'm Derek Watts, and this is...
As a journalist, he has to have probably the longest career of any broadcast journalist, certainly on the African continent, if not globally.
He's been the fabric of storytelling of South African stories since as far back as I can remember.
Hello and welcome to the last Carte Blanche of 1993.
Sunday night, and I'd be sitting on the floor, dreading the fact that I have to go to school tomorrow, and my mother would tell us, shh, keep quiet, Derek and Ruda are on, and it's serious news.
I watched the very first episode of Carte Blanche when I was 15 years old. I knew that in order for me to prepare for this Carte Blanche interview, which I would one day do in my head, and I would audition for the show,
I watched his every single move. I have this little book at home where I would write notes because for me it served as almost a textbook of what existed and how it should be done. So I knew Derek as a fan just like millions of other South Africans.
Derek Neil Watts was born in 1948 in Hillbrow, Johannesburg. He was the youngest of 3 behind his brother Roy and sister Gaynor.
He was Mr. Carte Blanche, right? Look at Carte Blanche, for me it's like the ultimate. That's the holy grail.
People want to share their stories. People want to tell their deepest, darkest secrets.
Derek's father, Basil, a fitter and turner, was a disarmingly honest man with a hatred of lies. His mother, Edna, would entertain friends with her piano playing and a few risque routines. Qualities Derek inherited, an ability to capture an audience.
Dennis, eh?
Yes?
Derek's my name. From Carte Blanche.
Yeah, pleased to meet you.
And an abhorrence of dishonesty.
Dennis, you try and sell courses for 150,000 for one course. What was he going to get out of that?
That's irrelevant.
The family moved to Bulawayo in what was then Rhodesia. Derek was an easygoing boy who loved reading. He was also naughty, an out-and-out rebel.
Fun was at the center of a lot of what he would be doing. So it looks very serious. We're broadcasting live to the nation in the studio, but trust me, they're little cheeky dad jokes that are creeping in. He's making fun of camera crew. He's having a good time. You can imagine what Derek was like when he was a teenager. Just...
You're fast, eh?
Why you got a long noise?
Whoa, that's very rude.
Laid back, personal, hugely curious, Derek was not a great success as a student at Natal University. It was not the endless party he'd envisaged.
It's the naughtiness. He's got a very, very wicked sense of humor.
There are 15 international versions of Penthouse magazine, and it's been my duty as a Carte Blanche reporter to flip through most of them.
His father thought the army would sort him out, and in a sense it did. He was selected for the officers' training course, ending up as a company commander in the Rhodesian Bush War or the Zimbabwean Liberation War, depending on whose side you were. A long and bitter conflict.
There was a lot of propaganda. We know that. Being told we were fighting against CT's communist terrorists. But, you know, the truth was different, wasn't it? I mean, it was a liberation struggle, and I think at the back of our minds, yeah, we knew that was really what it was about. But in the end, many people lost their lives. I think by 78, I'd lost that initial belief in what we were fighting for.
It's in the army that key characteristics of the Derek identity came to the fore, so evident in some of his tougher assignments.
There is the famous story, I don't know if it's become urban legend or if it's being embellished, but the story that he did in the Balkans during that terrible war in Bosnia in the early 90s, when he traveled to cover an amazing British woman. He arrived in Mostar, a town at the center of this conflict, and did a piece to camera in what he thought was just an arbitrary road. And he was informed by the locals later that it was Sniper's Alley and that he could have been shot at any moment.
In this area, hardly a building has been left intact. There's a putrid smell in the air. You can only imagine how much blood has been spilt, how many lives have been lost, how many families obliterated in this street alone.
Working as a cadet reporter for the Rhodesian Herald, in between his army postings,
Derek became very disillusioned. The Smith government's censorship prevented journalists reporting on what was really happening in the country.
Derek Watts, he is truth to power. He is a social justice warrior. He was just this ginormous, larger-than-life person who walked into the room and just owned it, but there was just so much light and warmth. I think I may have been a little bit too starstruck in the beginning, but who isn't when they meet Derek Watts?
We've been invited in for a cup of tea, or chai as they call it, and it's very rude not to accept. But Hashim Okat over here, he was saying that he'd rather die than live like this for the rest of his life.
Derek had an extraordinary enthusiasm for bringing the news. During the crisis following 9/11, I sent Derek and producer Diana Lucas to the Persian Gulf, and the mission was to get onto the USS George Washington. But getting onto a US warship is no easy feat, particularly when you've got the likes of the BBC and CNN and you name it, all the big international channels attempting to do the same thing. But Derek and Diana charmed their way onto the USS George Washington. Now, that for me was the extraordinary determination of Derek.
A question that comes to mind is, how do you defend this huge floating platform in a military world of long-range missiles which have pinpoint accuracy and enemy aircraft that are difficult to detect and destroy? We found most of the answers here in the Combat Direction Center.
We like to consider ourselves actually less of a target than an Air Force base.
When he came back, we got an insight into the magnitude of the American military presence in the Persian Gulf. He brought me the trophy, and the trophy was a cap of the USS George Washington, which I wear with pride to this day.
The very first time I actually saw Derek Watts, Transkei 1982, I'm about 8 years old. I've never seen a television set before. I'm visiting a friend from across the road, and it happens to be a Saturday afternoon. And Top Sport is playing. And guess who the presenter was?
Good evening. When 13 wickets tumble in one day, you know that the Wanderers' track is a little tricky.
In the early 80s, sports mad Derek was in his dream job, in front of the camera. It's in Johannesburg, presenting Top Sport for SABC.
I was a newsreader and he was a sports presenter. So I didn't really have a great deal to do with him then, but he came into the Agenda offices, which was a current affairs show on the SABC, to speak to one of my colleagues, the anchor of Agenda, John Bishop, to ask his advice about coming to a current affairs show called Carte Blanche. It's extraordinary because how did either of us know that we would land up working together?
In 1988, Mnet, a brand new South African TV channel, launched Carte Blanche, a weekly current affairs program.
When you think of the beginning of Carte Blanche, you must always remember that it was a completely different time. We were the first alternative to the SABC. So, August 1988, and Bill Faure phones, and he says, starting a show, an hour on a Sunday night. Do you want to present?
Carte Blanche was producer Bill Faure's brainchild. He wants Derek to co-host the new show with Ruda. 40-year-old Derek, known as the affable Top Sport presenter, is a surprising choice.
Enjoy the program.
Good evening. evening and welcome to our first edition of Carte Blanche. That's the name that was chosen in our name-finding competition. Ruda.
I did not know Derek. I had never met him. And he came from a completely different background. I came from news and actuality. He came from sport. And I think what made the partnership so strong is exactly the fact that we were different. This is a completely different Carte Blanche. We are going to put on a different guise today. And isn't it just? Yeah, and then work with the middle bit. He was the most amazing partner to have in studio because you could relax completely. He would have it in hand, and that he would never let anything go wrong. You know, even when he was teasing me, which he did, he would not make me look bad.
I'm being overcome by these fumes. How do you expect me to read my bits?
They were a magnificent team together. His yin to her yang, or whichever way you put it. She was the deeply intellectual, serious type, and he was the accessible, common man. It was a magical combination.
I think he loves being on air. He loves broadcasting, and it shines through.
That was an incredible sight, Simon. He's got a 6-meter female here.
He has a very quirky sense of humor, and he pushes the boundaries. He's not PC. Like the evening, we had an insert on fitness of some kind, and as we came out of it, he said to me on air, live, well, women, of course, keep fit by jumping to conclusions. And, you know, you're just left with, what?
Well, jogging through, Alex, you get a very down-to-earth look at the township and the conditions.
So hard to believe now that this insert on Alexandra Township in the late 80s was a trailblazer.
Carte Blanche won the first award ever for an insert on Alexandra Township. And it tells you so much about South Africa at that point that it was remarkable, because now it wouldn't be. Then, for 2 white presenters to go and spend a day in Alexandra, it won us an award, because our white audience had never seen that. Because apartheid worked, it kept us apart.
As in this award-winning story, the magic and personality of what Derek brought to the screen would define all his stories.
These guys are so tired and in so much pain that you want to help them, but I guess that's against the rules.
You have to tell all different types of story and access all parts of you to be able to tell those stories. And Derek was able to do that for over 30 years in the ever-changing landscape of this country. To the homeless person, the go-go, to powerful politicians and businessmen, to crooks. He was able to do it.
I'm walking with Gladys Beloy, and she walks quite well. Quite sprightly, really, for a dead person, because according to Home Affairs, she's been dead for 5 years.
Derek gave us all the blueprint to do the job that we do.
We did nothing. But the media and most people say that the police support Carter.
Oh, no, that's ridiculous. Look at what is happening now. The police again who have cash.
It was a completely different world that we walked into, and which enlarged our world, our vision.
And as South Africa entered a roller coaster ride of change, Carte Blanche held up the mirror in which we saw ourselves.
Any doubts about the EFF arriving in force were dispelled early this morning.
I remember him covering an EFF rally that was quite contentious, with farmers on one side, and there were racial tensions. And he knew how to relate to both sides and make both sides feel they have a friend in him. And that will forever be Derek's legacy, his ability to adapt, his ability to transfer that warmth that he had to everyone and everything he touched.
Africa's first democratically elected president.
April 27th, 1994. With South Africa's first democratic elections, the world opened up as Carte Blanche began to explore outside our borders. Derek's passport was ready.
Carte Blanche, South Africa. Look forward to your visit.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time.
I know that Derek had his favorite stories. Landing on an aircraft carrier in the Gulf War, traveling to Everest Base Camp, interviewing Mark Shuttleworth in Russia ahead of his trip into space. But for me, and maybe what he took for granted, is the extent to which, for me, his body of work stands out. Just this profound consistency in which he was never anything more or less than Derek was. And I think that's what people gravitated towards. And it's a very, very difficult thing to do in our industry.
Start recording.
And looking into camera.
Looking directly into camera. Yes. And at what point do I start recording? When it rings or before? No, don't worry. You just have to start to press start, and then it's going to count you in.
I am the Instagram person in the team. Claire is big on TikTok. So she said, guys, I'd really want you to participate in one of my TikTok videos. And I said, say less, I'm keen. And Derek, we had to basically school him on TikTok first, how it's going to work, and take him through it one at a time.
Good morning, angels.
Good morning, Charlie. All he needed to do was say, hello, angels. And he wanted to do more the whole time. So Claire kept saying, no, you don't need, he says, do I say it and then cut frame, walk up? No. Just say, hello, angels. He says, afterwards, should I turn to you, angels? No, and it was just hilarious, but also indicative of Derek because he really gave his best and the most all the time.
In 1989, the elusive bachelor's life changed forever, marrying the petite but feisty Belinda Woodhead. A son, Tyrone, and daughter, Kirsty, completed their family.
Oh, you want a kiss as well, girlie? You want a kissy?
Derek certainly loved his work, but his family always came first. His children were very, very important to him. And that's how we got to know the kids, because Tyrone would come into the studio as a little boy.
When filming finished in the studio on a Sunday night,
Okay, been a tough day.
his first priority was to get home to be with his wife and his children.
Can I get you a drink, darling?
I've got one, thanks, Dad.
I started at Carte Blanche in 2019, and that year I lost my king, my dad. And while he was in hospital, Derek would check on me. How are you doing? How are you holding up? And I mean, I was a very new member to the team, and he showed me so much support during that time until the end. He became a father figure.
Despite a positive attitude, it took a special... Would you say that one of the low points of your life was passing up primary school with the kids chanting out at you?
Little kiddies came running to the fence, screaming, "Monster, monster!"
W. Mitchell made a profound impact on Derek. And his story was an extraordinary story of a man who'd lost both his legs and both his hands, but he still stood for Congress in the United States.
What I wanted to tell them is that yes, I'm different, I look different, but inside is a wonderful gift, and that in their lifetime, they're going to see lots of packages. But if we just look at the package, we're going to miss a lot of gifts, a lot of opportunities in life.
And Mitchell said, it doesn't matter what happens to you, it's what you do that counts. And that penetrated Derek's psyche to a high degree. And so when Derek's daughter took ill with cancer, he made sure that they turned it into a positive, and thank God, Kirsty got well and created the Kirsty Watts Foundation, which Derek then supported to the hilt.
Despite being bombarded with media... But I mean, from now until the wedding in July, surely it's just one big rush.
Oh, gee, Derek, I've got a file this thick on my desk. I won't begin to tell you about that right now.
Derek is so easy to be with. But when he talks to you, he looks at you and he sees you.
I'm just amazed that you could deal with all this happening.
it's not easy, but what other choice do you have?
The people stories that he told really mattered to him. He remembered people from 30 years ago that he interviewed only once. You know, he had time. Walking with Derek was like walking with a turtle because he stopped for everyone.
Good to see you.
Producers hate working with him because he's like, you know, he'll meet someone he interviewed a long time ago, someone that he, you know, watched on a story, but he'll give them their time of day and really, really be invested in having this conversation with this person, which is something really endearing about him.
I learned so much from him as a human, never mind as a brilliant broadcaster that he was.
Well, this is at the Luanda Zoo, situated right on the edge of the ocean.
Derek's most traumatic experience in his long career, 1994, Angola. He and producer Rick Lomber were documenting the transport of forgotten caged animals to the Johannesburg Zoo.
We heard what had happened, of course, that Rick had been killed by a tiger. Derek was flying back with the body on a freight plane. It finally landed and Belinda went up the stairs to meet Derek. He'd been through this terrible trauma of seeing Rick being killed. And then, of course, they both knew that the show must go on.
To tell the story, we found a quiet corner of the airport.
Maybe about 20 minutes before he died, he was joking with somebody, and somebody was being a bit serious, and he said, look, don't take this serious. He says, nobody gets out of this life alive anyway.
I did an interview. I supported him in telling the story. And I remember so clearly sitting on the couch like that, and our hands were over the back, and I just clutched his hand because it felt as if I was holding him together. You know, and always in our work, you get this, that you almost need to debrief. This was probably one of the most important moments that Derek had to do that. He had to tell the story.
Yeah, it was just something that went very wrong. Maybe I just want to.
Up in the club with my homies, trying to get a little VI, keep it down on the low key. She know how it is. I saw the shorty, she was checking up for me. From the game, she was sitting in my ear. You would think that she knew me. Decided to cheat when I told her, I said.
People talk about this attraction that he has to people across generations, across cultures, across genders. And I think it's because that people recognized in Derek the attributes that they admire most in people.
Swandile.
I may have seen you once or twice.
Somewhere.
I think it was an SABC one. No, that's not it. You guys remember?
He was generous. He was kind. He made time for people, always. And I think people, even through a television screen, were able to recognize that in Derek. And I think we as a team recognize that too.
Dev teams get a smaller reporter for this job.
No less enchanted with these monuments are the people.
Need to be ready. Because I think the president's coming right now.
No matter how mighty or powerful they may be, he had a way of talking to them as if they were his mates.
Magic in '95 and magic again in 2007. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. No, I like to support our teams.
He spoke to Madiba as respectfully as he could, but at the same time, there was a commonality of humanity that came across between them. And that applied to no matter who he spoke to.
Derek's most loved celebrity interview, Jane Fonda, whom he met on her ranch in New Mexico, USA.
Hey! Whoa! Whoa! Yoo-hoo! What do you do? What do you do? You don't let it break the line. Yoo-hoo! Nice fish.
There was such a wonderful dynamic between us, always. Even though, weirdly enough, off-screen, we did not become close friends. But there was never a distance. On screen, we were totally focused on each other, working in tandem. It's a very special kind of interaction.
After 19 years of co-anchoring Carte Blanche in 2007, Ruda decided it was time to take a bow.
When Ruda left Carte Blanche, he assumed the responsibility of the person who would ask the difficult questions. And he did that with aplomb. And I think the more difficult the challenges became as a country, I think the more intent he became on holding people to account.
Jeez, look at this. Hey, is this an operation or what?
Derek was good at the confrontational stories, and he did it Derek's way.
Rob, can we help? Hello, sir. How are you doing? Fine.
Derek has always been a nice guy, even to our crooks. And he'd always say, no, you know, we've got to give people a fair hearing.
If you've got nothing to hide, why haven't you spoken to us?
Advised of our lawyer. He would be almost translating the frustration you felt as a viewer. How could you have done this? And he would look these people in the eye.
Stephanie?
Yes.
We've had allegations of child abuse.
While he never shouted and yelled and lost his cool, he was very firm. And there's a balance in that he's just got it.
Ahmed.
Yes, sir.
Derek Watts.
How are you, Derek?
From Carte Blanche.
I know you, sir.
What are you doing?
I'm just helping the lady.
We actually know what you're doing. You're actually slowing down meters all over town.
Start trying to make a living now.
When he speaks to you, he speaks with authority, and you almost feel like, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have done this. I've let Derek down and the country down. That's what it feels like.
It's crazy. The rocks keep raining down. The strikes, if you call them that, don't give up. It's just going to carry on through the night.
I remember having a conversation with him, and he says, as tiring as it gets sometimes and heartbreaking as it gets, he said, but imagine if we didn't do it, Mac. All of these stories, all of these investigations, all of the stuff that makes a lot of people want to pack up and leave. Imagine if we didn't do the work that we do.
Derek must have walked through more airport terminals than most.
Just looking for my luggage. It's khaki with a black handle. I can't seem...
Countless destinations, exotic explorations, state-of-the-art technology, following dreams later dashed.
This is where Oscar spent most of his time. In fact, he called it the office, training in this very lane at the Jamona Athletics track.
All fed Derek's insatiable appetite for novelty and adventure. But the vehicle he chose to steer on his home ground was unexpected.
I remember going for lunch with him once, and he comes out of the tiniest little Fiat. I don't know if people know that Derek would drive the smallest of cars and then emerge out of it, in all his glory. And I said, Derek, is that your daughter's car? Like, why? He said, it's a great car.
We did see Derek as a patriarch. He was the team leader, executive producer notwithstanding. He was the person around whom everything seemed to revolve.
We wanted to give you a chance to ask us some questions, and we've had a flood of them, especially for Derek. You ready, Derek?
I'm ready. Nothing too personal.
Telling stories out there is one thing. Getting into that live studio on a Sunday night at 7 o'clock, broadcasting to South Africa, a whole nother animal. There are 4 or 5 cameramen, there's a sound guy, there's somebody who's operating the auto cue, there are directors. There's a room full in the control room that you don't know, don't see, but make the show happen. And he knew everyone, greeted everyone by name, had a moment with everyone.
He understood that while the rest of South Africa believed he was Carte Blanche, he knew that he wasn't. He knew that he was a product of the efforts of everybody else that worked behind the scenes.
I hate to mention it, but the auto cue's gone again.
No.
No,
Really?
it's back, it's back, it's back, it's back.
He would always just tell me, as we were getting the 10-second countdown to live, 5, 4, and he'd look at me and says, have a good show. And for some reason, that little wink would give you the confidence to know, I'm at the right place, I'm at the right time, I can trust my co-anchor, we've got this. Cue Claire, you're live to the nation.
In 2022, Derek was diagnosed with skin cancer, which had spread to his lungs. With the support of his family and specialists, he continued doing what he loved best.
These are not paddles like everyone would think like in Formula One. It's not for shifting up and down. We only have one gear. These are used to activate different modes in the car, so it's...
It would have weighed on him, I'm sure. But remarkably, he never let it weigh on his work. And he never created the impression amongst his colleagues, amongst his friends, and amongst the people that he met while working, that it was weighing him down. And so he was insistent at the outset that he would continue working.
A driver allegedly struck and killed a cyclist on the pavement in Johannesburg, dragging him.
When McFarlane Moledi took up the challenge to complete an Ironman in a tribute to a friend who had died in a cycle accident, Derek was there.
When Derek became a part of that story, I didn't know the seriousness of his illness at that time, but he was there every step of the way.
Y'all, 180 kilometers done, 42 more to go.
Yeah. There was a point when I was doing the 42-kilometer run, and you're just saying, Mac, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going.
Just keep going, and not far to go.
And then right at the end, my mom put the medal over my head, and Derek was standing on the other side, and I went and I gave him a big hug, and it's a moment that will, that'll live with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, man. Hey, what a moment for you. Hey, I'm not the whole thing.
In March 2023, Derek fell ill while on a family break. He was rushed to Mill Park Hospital and diagnosed with acute sepsis. His recovery was challenging. Derek recorded a message from his hospital bed.
Really want to thank our viewers. They're so loyal to the program, and for the messages, the love, the prayers. I really appreciate them.
Wherever I was, in a shopping mall, at an airport, people would come to me and be like, how's Derek? Is Derek okay? We have him in our prayers. And his willingness to even share that very intimate journey that he was going through was a big thing.
For me, it's difficult to see him like that, and to know what he did for me, to be there at that finish line. And it really meant a lot to me, He's given so much of himself to all of us.
Derek's longevity in this business is legendary. Through his more than 30 years on Carte Blanche alone, we have witnessed history through his eyes.
Everyone has a story, and Derek had the ability to help people tell their stories.
When South Africa was just beginning to grow out of the apartheid days and into what we would become, Derek has helped tell the story of an enormously important phase, 3 decades, in the life of this country.
He told this country's stories with dignity, with poise, and a slight bit of humor that you needed.
He set the bar for investigative television journalism in this country. There's no argument about that.
You don't have to be rude to do what we do. Perhaps more than anything, as a practitioner of what he did, I have learned that this is ultimately a job about decency. Derek Watts fundamentally was a decent human being.
We all start out as these fresh-faced, ambitious journalists ready to travel to the four corners of the world and, you know, take everybody on and win the awards. And of course, Derek has done all of that and more. But your priorities change when you have children. And so I think that the best you can hope for is that your wife, your children love you, respect you, admire you, and that you do right by them. And so if Derek has a legacy, I think that it transcends what he did for a living. Because I think that his children and his wife have every reason to be extraordinarily proud of him.
Give me a minute. How does one quantify the legacy of a man who has produced such an enormous body of work? Derek chronicled modern South African history, all the way into the new democracy, seeing the marvelous changes that occurred and how the country won recognition and respect, and then seeing the decline in terms of the corruption and the amount of criminality. Derek leaves an enormous body of work that deserves an enormous amount of respect.
Cheers, Derek. Bye.
Derek was the kind of journalist that many of us aspire to be. Tough when a situation demanded it, compassionate to a fault. He was first and foremost, though, a family man, an example of how life can be lived to its fullest extent without treading on the aspirations of others. We were privileged to have known him. On behalf of the chairman and board of the MultiChoice Group and our Carte Blanche team, we would like to extend our deepest gratitude to Belinda, Tyrone, and Kirsten for sharing him with us for all these years. Our sincerest condolences to you and your entire family for your profound loss.
For 35 years, Mnet was Derek's home. And we would like to thank the channel and MultiChoice for their immense care and support over these years. And to you, our viewers across the continent. Belinda tells us that right to the very end, he wanted to thank each one of you for your love and for your trust. Derek leaves behind an extraordinary legacy of humility, courage, and hope.
Malo, we'll miss you dearly. But from all of us here who worked with Derek, who loved Derek, thank you for joining us and for helping us pay tribute to our Papadi.